Everybody, my next guest here on the Phillip Jordan Show is one of my colleagues at Last Word on College Football. First time coming on the show, Travis Knobbe covers the West Virginia Mountaineers for Last Word on College Football. You also check him out over on Mark Rogers TV as well. And Travis, I appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah, happy to be here, man. And what a great topic to talk about today, too.
Yeah, I told you off air, and I'll tell everybody this: one of the most intriguing matchups for the week one of college football, once we got past week 0, is the backyard brawl returning. Because I feel like the really shame or the bad thing about realignment is we lose some rivalries. And I think this has always been, and maybe for people because we've had so much distance from the last time it was played, really one of the more underappreciated rivalries. But as someone that covers West Virginia and just the fan base and everything, what's the excitement level coming for Thursday night with the return of the backyard brawl?
Oh man, I'm gonna quote Spinal Tap. Turn it up to 11, baby. that's where it's at.
Oh yeah, I go.
Go ahead.
I know you go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, it's sort of fever pitch. We're all glad to have it back. It's been 11 years since it's been played. And while we understand the national fan base has kind of lost sight of it, it's an historic game that has had some important moments in its history. And, unfortunately, Northeast football has been one of the big victims of realignment. I mean, those old Northeast rivalries down into sort of the Mid-Atlantic have kind of gone by the wayside as the SEC has come to dominate. But we hope to see some good old-fashioned Northeast football.
Yeah, just for people out there, what is this rivalry about? Like, what is the hatred or the angst between the two fan bases?
I mean, one is that it's an old rivalry. I mean, it's we played over 100 games in the course of it. Pitt and Morgantown are separated by, basically an hour 10-minute drive, sometimes a little longer with traffic. So, 70 miles between the two schools. They're close in geography. And, it's always kind of been sort of, Pittsburgh is the, was one of the original sort of frontier cities, right? But it was a city nonetheless. And Morgantown and West Virginia is sort of not really seen as city folk, right? So it's kind of that urban versus rural attitude as well, where we've always considered ourselves more blue collar. And all due respect to Pittsburgh, because it's a steel town fundamentally, so it's blue collar as well. But it's just kind of been that elitist Pitt attitude versus West Virginia, and us saying we're just going to punch you in the mouth and be done with it.
Yeah, I know. And like I said, it's been since 2011 the last play, because that was the year Pitt went to the ACC and then West Virginia went to the Big 12, which is always still weird to say, just the geography. But hey, as we see now, the Big 10 geography means absolutely nothing when it comes to realignment. And going to play this year 22 through 25 and play again 29 through 32. So what are you looking, before we jump in, just talking about West Virginia here, previewing them team a little bit? What's a memorable game or moment that sticks out to you in this rivalry?
I mean, unfortunately, the most memorable moment in this rivalry is not a good one. It's 13-9. I mean, we're knocking on the doorstep of being in the BCS championship in a month, and Pitt comes to town, and they've only won 4 games at the time. They're having a really down year. We've got Pat White. We're sort of hanging 40 points of everybody, and then Pitt comes into town and beats us 13-9. That's, I mean, again, the most memorable doesn't necessarily have to be good, and that's the one that stings.
I remember that season. It was a curse to be ranked number 2 that year, because that's the year LSU lost 2 games and won the national championship, I believe.
Yeah, and I think if I remember that right, the way that it would have shaken out is that West Virginia and Ohio State would have played in the national championship game, and LSU and West Virginia were actually pretty similar in sort of chemistry and makeup. They were both built sort of fast, right? And Ohio State was built as sort of that slogging, pro style Big Ten, traditional Big Ten team that they had. So I I think we would have put the same result that Ohio State that LSU did that year. We just didn't get the chance because of one goof. But you're right, that every number 2 team lost like the minute they were christened the number 2 team.
Yeah, I remember that year. Les Miles said we were undefeated in regulation because both their losses were in overtime that year. But it was a crazy year. I'll remember that year. Looking at this West Virginia team, I know we're recording this on Monday. The pod's dropping on Wednesday, but shocking news come out of West Virginia, Travis. JT Daniels is your starting quarterback.
Absolutely shocking indeed. I actually had, I wrote an article about a Mountaineer Legends pregame show that is starting up this year, where 2 of our famous alumni, Dale Wolfley and Brian Joswiak rather, are going to host various Mountaineer Legends as sort of a Mountaineer focused pregame. And I share this article on Facebook, and somebody responds to it and says, it would be insightful if they could tell us who the starting quarterback is. And I'm like, are you serious? This was yesterday, by the way. Well, I guess Sunday, since this will air Wednesday, but like, this is, come on, man. JT Daniels has been the starter since he transferred into West Virginia. It was just a formality.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, with him too. Just what's the word been coming out? I've seen Bryce Ford Wheaton had some wide receiver has some very positive things to say about JT Daniels. And we know JT Daniels is talented. It's been the health. His health has been his biggest obstacle. He is a pro talent quarterback. I wouldn't say, he was going to be a good NFL quarterback, but he has the talent to do so. But what's been the word coming out of West Virginia about JT Daniels?
Every observer who's watched JT Daniels prepare in practice has said that he is one of the smartest quarterbacks they've ever seen. That he's really got it between the ears. Really understands, things that fans don't really think about that often. You think about quarterbacks as who's the most accurate, who can sort of adapt on the fly and make things happen. But a lot of what a quarterback does is pre-snap read, right? I mean, they're sitting in the pocket and they're watching the alignment of the defense, and they're watching a twitch on an offensive lineman or a linebacker, and sort of predicting where things are coming from and who's going to be open. JT Daniels has that in spades, is sort of the universal word coming out about him. And that is a far cry from the quarterback that we've had the last couple of years. No disrespect to him. I love Jarrett Dagey. He fought really hard for the university and people of the state, but JT Daniels simply has things that Jarrett Dagey didn't.
Yeah, now Troy backup quarterback, Jarrett Dagey. That was a shocker that he'll come into Troy, because they already had one transfer, Peter Caselli, coming from Utah. Then he added him. I said, what is John Summerall doing? Is he collecting quarterbacks in Troy? But
right, like 6-year quarterbacks too.
Yeah, a bunch of and that kind of does transition to what I was going to ask you next about West Virginia. I'll bring up Troy and Neil Brown. He's going to his 4th year, 17-18 overall. Just what's the pressure level you think on him this season with him? I mean, going, like I said, 17-18, year 4. What's the pressure level?
I mean, from the fan base perspective, the pressure level is high. The fans, they range from lukewarm to really cold on him at the moment. West Virginia fans have come to expect that they should be able to win between 7 and 10 games a year, with the 10 game being sort of every 3rd, 4th year sort of thing. And Neil Brown has yet to deliver that. From sort of the school's perspective, the athletic department's perspective, I don't think his seat is nearly as hot as the fans perceive it to be. But at some point, your donors need to be made happy, and your donors are made happy by wins. Mm-hmm. So, I guess it's probably, he's not on the hot seat, but it's warm.
Interesting bringing in Graham Harrell, offensive coordinator. And it's really because Neil Brown's the kind of guy, offensive guy. Yeah, he throws the ball, but he wants to run the ball first. That's kind of like what he wants to do. And Graham Harrell comes in more from that air raid system, air raid background. How do you see those two philosophies, those two working together?
So when I listen to Graham Harrell, it's sort of interesting because you look at what his offenses have done, and they have been pass heavy. They've ranged from sort of 54% pass to up to 58% pass. Not quite as pass heavy as Mike Leach, obviously, but still favor the pass. The last couple of years, believe it or not, Neil Brown has had some games where he's gone 60 to 65% air. Some of that was just game flow and getting behind early. But I think that Graham Harrell, the way that he describes the air raid is not necessarily that it's almost like it's a misnomer, right? Graham Harrell says the things we want to do in the air raid, it's a concept of just doing what you do well, sort of slowing down the game for people by keeping it simple. And the way you complicate it is by masking what's happening. And at the end of the day, it's only a handful of plays that you're actually running. There are just slight variations to how it looks before the snap. So Graham Harrell doesn't necessarily say, I'm going to pass the ball all the time. He says, we're going to do what we do well. And if what we do well proves to be that we have the ability to run the ball, I don't think that Graham Harrell is going to shy away from it. And Neil Brown is not going to let him shy away from it unless the game flow dictates that we need to, air it out more than pass. And we'll talk about that when we talk about Pitt, but I think that's going to end up being a game script that looks more like that. It's going to be more in the air than the ground. But long way of saying, I think it's going to be more balanced than people think on the outside.
Oh, and real quick before we do jump back into the Pitt or West Virginia game, just the defense of West Virginia. I know they got a lot of veterans coming back on defensive front, really good there, but they got hit hard in the secondary with transfer portal. They do have Charles Woods returning in the secondary, but what's your overall read on the defense?
So yeah, I mean, front the two fronts, linebackers and defensive line, we're fine there. We're good. Secondary is a question mark because guys have to prove it. But I actually think that a lot of the losses in the secondary over the last couple of years have been addition by subtraction. There were some guys that couldn't play man coverage very well, so we kind of had to adjust the defense to run zone coverage more often than we would have wanted. And the coaching staff has said this specifically. They've not named anybody by name, but when you come out and your first week of summer camp, you say, we've got some speed, we've got some length, we've got some guys that can recover from mistakes that they weren't able to do that in the past few years. They're basically saying some of the guys we lost, we kind of meant for them to be lost. And they're getting guys that come from, they have a G5 guy and they have some FCS guys that have started, dozens of games, up to 30 plus games they've started. So these aren't guys that come in with no experience. They just don't have Power 5 week in, week out experience. But they are guys who have bought into the sort of team first mentality that Neil Brown wants. As a result, I think our secondary is going to be a lot more dangerous than folks think. Now, that's my preseason prediction. We'll see what happens. But I do think we're actually going to see improvement in the secondary.
So let's go on to the matchup with Pitt. Pitt's coming off a great year. They won 11-3. They won the ACC. Obviously, they're replacing Kenny Pickett. They got Keaton Slovis coming in. Jordan Addison, the Biletnikoff Award winner, left to go to USC. But Keaton Slovis at quarterback. As a freshman at USC, he looked really good. He threw over 3,500 yards, 30 touchdowns, and all that. But when you look at the matchup between West Virginia's defense versus the Pitt's offense, I mean, what are you seeing? Because obviously Keaton Slovis is a quarterback that may want to push the ball down the field just the way you've seen USC. Just so, where do you see that matchup?
So I think that West Virginia has actually a bigger advantage in that matchup than maybe is first apparent. Graham Harrell coached him for 3 years. Um, and what happens when you coach a player is you learn more, maybe even more intimately than the player himself knows. What are his tells? What does he do well? How is he reading the defense? How does he understand the defense? And you'd be sure that Graham Harrell is telling his defensive coordinators and his, everybody on the defense, here's what Keaton Slovis is going to do.
Yeah.
Here's what he's going to look like. And Keaton Slovis, he had a really good freshman year coming off, replacing JT Daniels after he gets injured in that first game. First year, lights out, but he actually regressed every season statistically, and that's kind of the wrong direction. And in spring, I know that people who attended the spring game that Pitt held were not really that impressed with Slovis. He seemed to be taken to the offense more slowly than folks thought. How much can you draw from a spring game? We all know not too much, right? Defenses almost always have the advantage because they see the same offense every day. But I think we have the nod over Keaton Slovis. He's not nearly as good as Kenny Pickett. I mean, just put that out there, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, Kenny Pickett, I think, should be the Steelers start the quarterback when the season starts, but we'll see. It looks like, I don't know, they may go with Trubisky on that one. But anyways, when you look at now the West Virginia offense versus the Pitt defense, Pitt does return 6 all-ACC players from last year. They were really a top 40 defense last year, but they were not good against the pass. And 3 of 4 of them starters in their secondary come back. They were 12th in the ACC against the pass. And you look, we already talked about Graham Harrell may want to throw the ball, that whole deal with JT Daniels, the receivers that West Virginia does bring back. So flip it around. When JT Daniels is going up against the Pitt defense, what do you see there? Because it looks like on paper he should be able to have a pretty good evening against that defense.
Yeah, I mean, I think unless the Pitt secondary has improved substantially from last year, that will again be their weakness. They're not replacing anybody really, right? They have some backups who were younger, who are coming back that may step in and take some roles over as the season winds on. But they've announced their depth chart, and the 4 that you expected to start are the 4 that are starting, and they were all liabilities in the secondary last year. So kind of the opposite of West Virginia, where the liabilities that we did have are now gone. Pitt's liability, its biggest liability, is the secondary. And really what it comes down to is, can West Virginia's offensive line neutralize the defensive front enough to give JT Daniels time to pick that secondary apart? And if they can, it could be a high scoring affair. And that's kind of what I actually think West Virginia is going to score on their first possession and really never look back.
Okay, so that leads me to my next question, which you kind of maybe buried the lead on that one. I was going to ask you, who wins on Thursday night?
I think it's not only will I give you a winner, I'll give you the final score prediction. I think it's going to be 31-17 West Virginia.
Okay, and then when we just look at the season overall, what do you think are reasonable expectations for West Virginia this season?
Sort of when I pencil it in and I look at the schedule, I typically do like a floor ceiling analysis where I look at, all right, if all the things go wrong, here's where we're at. And in my view, if all the things go wrong, we're at 6 wins, regular season, not counting any bowl. But I think there's a really low percentage chance that we finish with 6 wins. I think 7 to 9 is probably the more reasonable range of expectations. And depending on how things play out and what they prove on the field Thursday, I think that 9 is more likely than 6 as far as wins go. So I think West Virginia has a good shot at surprising a lot of people this year.
It's going to be interesting. I'm interested to see the battle of the USC former quarterbacks going at each other. You know, that whole connection is there with Graham Harrell as well, coaching both of them. So it's going to be an intriguing matchup on Thursday night, and I can't wait. Backyard Brawl is back. And Travis, this has been a lot of fun having you on the show. First time. Hope it's not the first and last. I hope we get you on once again. But if the listeners and viewers want to follow you online, where can they follow you and all the work you're doing?
Well, normally it's on Twitter where I share my work, or Facebook. Both of those places, it's just my name, Travis Knobbe. I do actually have a Facebook page where I share my articles called Country Roads Football. So on Twitter, Facebook, just my name. I didn't do anything fancy with it. And Country Roads Football is where I share all my articles on Facebook.
All right, sounds good, Travis. Once again, appreciate the time, and I hope we can do this again sometime down.